Praise be Jesus Christ, now and forever. Whenever there is a terrorist attack, particularly in Europe, politicians rush to stress the values that apparently unite us. These appear to focus around a vague notion of tolerance and not much else. It might be worth asking, what foundation are these values built upon, and is that foundation stable? Secular materialism, which is the true value most of the politicians are really talking about, is in itself a form of religion, the true opiate of the people, the religion of the self, and the glorification of individualism. In 1931, the poet and writer T.S. Eliot took on the role of prophet, not only speaking of the horrors of fascism and communism, but addressing the modern society, a society without God. It's worth quoting Eliot in full. His rather long sentence should be the subject of much thought and meditation for us this week. He wrote, "The world is trying the experiment of attempting to form a civilized but non-Christian morality. The experiment will fail, but we must be very patient in awaiting its collapse, meanwhile redeeming the time, so that the faith may be preserved alive through the dark ages before us." Nearly 90 years after those words were written, we can see how the experiment is progressing. Even after the Holocaust, the gulags, the revelation of what atheistic systems were capable of doing to the human person, this foul experiment has continued. So-called civilized nations, most of the world, enshrine in law the right to murder the unborn child in the womb. The elderly, the terminally ill, and now even the depressed have the right, under the law, to be euthanized. The divine institution of marriage is redefined, and God's revelation is described as intolerable hate speech. In the name of tolerance, all must be tolerated, except Christian teaching and morality. The experiment is a devilish nightmare. It is unlikely that Eliot could have foreseen the full consequences of the experiment, but he did see that it would eventually fail. That is indeed a word of prophecy and hope. His call for patience might need to be challenged, especially in the church, where some seem to have been a little too patient, or naive, or worse. Those with, as the Lord said, eyes to see and ears to hear, can no longer either be blind or fail to see where this is leading. The proposed values, which are meant to be the foundation of the modern Western world, are sand, and the scenes we see on our screens every night remind us of what Jesus taught in the parable of the two houses, the one built on rock and one on sand. Back in 2014, Pope Francis spoke at the European Parliament in Strasbourg, almost the epicenter of the secularist vision for Europe. Echoing Eliot, he described the great vacuum of ideals in the West, a consequence, we could say, of the failed experiment. Yet it is possible to see an awakening. In the great nation of Hungary, for example, family-friendly policies have lessened divorces, increased marriages, and increased the birth rate. There seems to be a greater realization among the properly formed or newly converted that patience, awaiting the collapse of this civilization without God, is no longer possible. The redeeming of time and preserving the faith through the dark ages is being accomplished with little points of light in monasteries, schools, families, and small Orthodox Christian communities in the West. For no other foundation can anyone lay than that which is laid, which is Jesus Christ, said St. Paul. We bow and kneel before one King, who is the source of our civilization and the only hope for its future. At the name of Jesus, every knee should bow, in heaven and on earth and under the earth.